World War II. This war happened during a time when photography was becoming increasingly mainstream, and photojournalists and even hobbyists could document it. As such, many photos were taken during this period, but some never made it to the history books, either because they didn't fit the narrative, were too graphic, or were rediscovered many years later, and the books just didn't get updated with these newfound treasures. Some of these photos reveal many interesting things about the war. U.S. soldiers weren't always serious and knew how to have fun, especially when the horrors of war still raged on. Dogs weren't just playthings, they served an important role. Other animals, including elephants, also helped with the war efforts and were photographed for their service. The Nazis, while horrific, also laughed and enjoyed music, including making a swastika from records. As usual, like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications to join us in uncovering the latest mysteries in the Old West and new frontiers in history. Delivery after raid. In 1940, the Blitz, an 8-month bombing campaign, tore the streets of the United Kingdom. As a response, photographer Fred Morley fought back. Not with bombs, but positive propaganda. It wasn't a candid photo, but staged to show a powerful message. This photo shows a milkman still making deliveries despite the smoldering rubble, with the firefighters still taking out the fires. Even after an air raid decimated the place, he continued his job. The purpose of this photo was to circumvent the ongoing censorship of ruined cityscapes and push the message of keep calm and carry on. Surprisingly, the British censors approved of this message, and the next day they published the photo. This photo symbolizes the British spirit, where even if London is turned to ruins, the people will still live their lives with smiles on their faces, and the milk still has to be delivered. The Magnificent 11. Robert Capa was a legendary war photographer who was there during D-Day. Capa was part of the earliest groups of soldiers to storm. While under fire, he took 106 photos of an early wave of troops as they landed on Omaha Beach. When they came ashore, Capa managed to capture these photos with two Contax 2 cameras mounted with 50mm lenses, along with several rolls of extra film. After, he returned to the UK within hours of the event to publish these photos for Life magazine's future issues. Unfortunately, a processing error meant that all but 11 photos were lost. While some historians dispute this processing claim, the images are authentic. They are not beautifully constructed stills, but instead a blurry, chaotic look into what happened during that day. Some critics even mentioned that the footage was slightly out of focus, mirroring the excitement that Capa felt during this event. Though Capa has denied the excitement, he did mention in his biography that his empty camera trembled in my hands, which prevented him from loading a new roll of film. The photos were met with praise, as many who looked at these photos felt like they were there with the troops. It also inspired films such as Saving Private Ryan. These photos are viewable at the International Center of Photography in New York City. They go to show that the best photos don't have to be perfectly shot, but can be right in the heart of the action. Sadly, Robert Capa would die at just 40 years old after stepping on a landmine in Vietnam. Kozarchanka. This photo was shot in the winter of 1943 or 1944 and shows a female Yugoslavian partisan with an MP-40 over her shoulder. The woman shot was Milja Marin, and her smiling face became an iconic photograph in socialist Yugoslavia. She was a Bosnian Serb from a small village near the foot of Mount Kozara. After the war, she would end up marrying a fellow partisan. This photo was not only seen in textbooks, posters, and war monographs, it was also the cover of Merlin, a Yugoslavian pop rock band's album in 1986. This photo offers a fascinating look at women soldiers during World War II. Most photos of the conflict are male-led, with women supporting their men from home. But in Yugoslavia, women were also on the front lines, the battered face of Germany. In 1945, shortly after the war-ending German surrender at Reims, several photos by photographer Margaret Bourke-White were published in Life magazine. She was flown over several parts of Germany, and the photos she took were eye-opening. During this time, she discovered the true nature and devastation of Germany at its worst and how it contributed to the overall Allied strategies. In the last few months of the war, many oil refineries and chemical plants were hit hard and often. which resulted in many Germans being unable to supply the fuel for their extensive oil and tanks. Many of the German cities looked unrecognizable, with rubble and windowless walls. One photo of the German city of Mainz almost looks like an uncovered ancient society from long ago. Another shows a town, Jülich, in ruins. What is fascinating is that the smaller towns, villages, and farming areas were left undamaged, with the war efforts concentrated primarily on the cities. Many other photos show just how many bombs were dropped in Germany. While the Nazis are a group that few aren't sympathetic to, these photos do bring in sympathies for the people, who may not have necessarily endorsed their government. It was a society that was waking up after the horrors of the Third Reich and would rebuild, but never forget. The Ebenhorod Einsatzgruppen photograph. This 1942 photo shows a soldier aiming his gun at a woman as she shields her child. The photo was meant to be kept between Nazis, but the Polish resistance managed to intercede and obtain the photo. This photo was used to portray the genocidal efforts against the Jews by Nazis within the area, to portray the horrors of what was going on. Over the decades, its authenticity began to be questioned as a communist forgery. As a response, a second photo emerged, Einsatzgruppen, showing the soldiers next to several dead bodies. It was soon proven, without a doubt, to be real. A soldier really did shoot a woman as she tried to protect her baby, as if both were a threat to society. These photos show how low humanity can go when soldiers obey orders uncritically and show no remorse when it comes to the murders of 6 million Jews. Easter eggs for Hitler. Soldiers in the Axis powers were fighting a great evil, yet they could have a sense of humor about it. This photo shows two soldiers, 5th grade William E. Thomas and Private First Class Joseph Jackson, preparing an Easter basket for Hitler. The eggs are bombs, in case you weren't looking at the photos. It was indeed springtime for Hitler, the toothy Führer. While Hitler wanted the perfect race, his teeth were anything but. His dentist, Dr. Hugo Johannes Blaschke, always told him to brush his teeth and floss and to contact him when there was an emergency. However, the Führer did not, and he had many cavities, crowns, and chipped and broken teeth during his life. Many photos of Hitler show him with his mouth closed for a good reason. Here is a rare postcard showing Hitler with his mouth open, showing that, yes, his teeth weren't the greatest. One appears to be missing or spaced out oddly. While we can't fault the average person for not being able to have perfect teeth, we can fault a man who had access to the best dentists in the world and prided himself on being perfect, laughing at the face of death. This photo looks like an outtake of a movie, but it's actually a photo of what is purported to be a Soviet spy laughing at a Finnish soldier who was about to pull the gun to execute him. Most would be begging for their lives, but this spy knows that no matter what, he's going to die. So sometimes, laughter is the best strategy. You may die, but your laughing face may haunt the soldier who shot you, and it leaves quite the statement when your body is found, and all that's seen is the laughter you experienced at the end of the road. Pearl Harbor dads. U.S. soldiers in World War II weren't just young men fresh out of high school, and sometimes younger. They were also men with wives and babies, leaving them behind to fight for the people. This photo at Detroit Central Station shows 3 dads kissing their babies goodbye as they leave for Fort Custer for training. The moms are all there, giving the dads each their child as one last memory for them to hold on to. Little do the babies know that their dads are going for a long time, possibly forever. We do not know the details of these dads if they come home to find out that their kids are not babies anymore. Here's hoping that all of these fathers made it home safe and sound. Soldier mocking Hitler. We did say Hitler had dental issues, but many of the other soldiers aimed for the obvious jokes about how he looked. Hitler's toothbrush mustache and oddly combed hair were jokes even back then. Here is a soldier mocking the Führer with a comb and a comb-over of his own. Hitler was parodied a lot back in the day, from cartoons to paintings, and people are still mocking him to this day. Manchester bombing. This photo was taken during the Manchester or Christmas Blitz, which was the heavy bombing of northwest England by the Luftwaffe. The raids happened during the span of 2 years, leaving the city in flaming ruins. This photo of Manchester shows firefighters putting out the flames of buildings that have been reduced to skeletons of their former selves. The steam and smoke rise through the air as they desperately try to put out the flames. Did they manage to succeed, or was it all a lost cause, like many of the other buildings during this time? Donkey going for a ride. In battle, soldiers tried to leave no one behind, including animals. This photo shows a soldier carrying a small donkey, almost like a backpack. The other soldiers remain unfazed by this man's care for animals. It's humorous yet wholesome at the same time. The donkey hopefully has a second chance at life and is able to escape the horrors of war and live his own life without any bother. Soldiers with a sense of humor. If you think that dirty jokes didn't exist in the past, think again. This photo shows a soldier holding what appears to be a bazooka, and another soldier stands in front of it like it's a risque part of his body. The photo goes to show that soldiers didn't have to be serious all of the time, but could also find humor even in the horrors of war. Nazi DJ. In Berlin, there was a radio exhibition, and a Nazi DJ was spinning records during the event to help boost morale amongst the people. In the background, the Nazi swastika is composed of records. While Nazis did have their music for propaganda, it's surreal to see their swastika comprised this way. Dogs of war. World War II had many canine companions as well. Let's look at some of them. Soviet dog. This is a photo of a dog wearing a Soviet military uniform, the pup standing proud with a cigarette in his mouth. He remains cool and composed, especially in the frigid winter. Who took this photo? What was the context? Not much is known about it, but it's funny, though some may be against the dog having a cigarette in his mouth like that. Meet Gunner, a Kelpie who would help the Allies in detecting Japanese military aircraft as they approached Darwin, Australia. While little is known about his true origins, he was first found as a stray in 1942 at an old mess hut on Darwin. 2 personnel heard a dog whimpering because of his broken leg. The dog was then brought to a military hospital where he was given the name Gunner and the number 0000 because the hospital refused to treat a patient without identification. Percy Westcott took ownership of him as his handler. While the dog was shaken up by what happened, he shook it all off and became a force to be reckoned with on the airfield, helping them detect bombs. Through whimpering and jumping, the teams knew when air raids and attacks were coming and were able to fight off the attacks. What's fascinating about Gunner is he did not act this same way with Allied aircraft, but also Japanese aircraft. Gunner survived the war and stayed at Darwin, looked after by the butcher on site. Gunner died in 1955 at the age of 13. Here's Chips, a German Shepherd and Collie Malamute mix. He had a short life of 6 years, but during that time, he earned his honor. In fact, he was the most decorated dog in World War II, allegedly decorated with the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, and the Purple Heart. While revoked by the Army because of a policy that prevented the commendation of animals, he did get awarded a theater ribbon with an arrowhead, along with battle stars for each of his campaigns. In 2018, he was given the PDSA Dickin Medal, along with the animals in War and Peace Medal of Bravery. Here is Venus. He was the mascot for the destroyer HMS Van Sittart. Dog mascots were often a cute and funny way to boost morale. Venus's nonchalant look as he helped steer the boat led many to victory, at least in the soldiers' hearts. Here's a famous black Labrador retriever dog with a storied history and controversy. He belonged to Guy Gibson of the British Royal Air Force and was the mascot of the 106 Squadron. He was one of the boys, including drinking his beer. During the Dambusters raid of 1943, he tragically died when hit by a motorist and was buried that midnight. Despite his story, he is often buried in history due to his name, which is a highly offensive racial slur for black people. However, at the time, Britain did not know about the history of that word. First, in 2020, his headstone was replaced, with his name removed and replaced by an image of a dog. Is this a change for the best, or is it whitewashing history? You decide. Elephants. It wasn't just dogs that helped during the war. Here is a photo of 2 elephants, Kiri and Meni, moving wreckage after a bombing raid. Trained under the circus, these elephants were obedient, and their raw strength helped rebuild during a period when the bombs kept dropping, and many of them were hard even for a team of men to move. Total blackout. Turning off all lights during an air raid was quite common during the war. Farmers worried about losing their livestock during a blackout would paint white stripes on them so that they could be seen easily should they wander onto a road. Here is a photo showing a cow getting its stripes in case it decided to take a nightly excursion. The picture of the last man to die. This photo shows the death of an American soldier during the Battle for Leipzig. Photographer Robert Capa took this photo of 21-year-old American soldier Raymond J. Bowman after a sniper had killed him. While a young life was tragically taken, the photograph showed beauty in the horrors of war. The lighting, framing, and blood subtly spilling on the ground made it an iconic image during wartime. Capa himself said this about the photo: "It was a very clean, somehow very beautiful death, and I think that's what I remember most from the war." This quote isn't downplaying the death of the young man, but shows that his death was not in vain. He is still remembered and discussed all of these years later. Let's now talk about color photographs. Color photography existed during World War II, but it was costly and complex. However, color photographs do exist. These photos help to modernize the war and remind us that it happened not even a century ago. First, let's look at some color photos showing soldiers preparing for D-Day. This photo shows soldiers playing darts between training. Most photos of soldiers during this time show them fighting, but few show what they do in their spare time. This impromptu game of darts reminds us that these soldiers were young men, barely out of childhood, who played games and had a good time with their friends. Here's a photo of U.S. Navy beachmasters communicating with ships using walkie-talkies and signal lamps. One guy is even digging holes for them to hide in case of attack. This image feels like a shot from a war movie, but it's actually a real photograph. While the men were at war, the women were at work. Let's look at some stunning photographs in color. The first was taken in October 1942 and shows a female lathe operator. This photo shows how color can truly bring an image to life. Her clothes pop out, and you start to notice subtle details like the grease stains on her arms, the cut on her knuckle, and even the red nail polish on her thumb, showing that even during a dirty job, a woman has to look pretty. Here's another photo of a black woman working on a Vengeance dive bomber. Again, the color pops out, from her bandana to her reflection, masterfully shown in the composite. Even with black people being marginalized and fighting for their rights, they knew to stand up for their country when a greater evil showed up to threaten everyone's lives. Here's a photo of a woman at the brake. The colorful thermos and clothing contrast perfectly with the steel surrounding her. It shows that even during the break, the work was never done and stood there to remind the women to get back to work. Let's now look at the infamous Adolf Hitler. Most of his photos show him in black and white, but some color photographs remain. Here is a photograph of Hitler taken by Hugo Jäger, Hitler's personal photographer. The striking red on his Nazi armband contrasts with the otherwise drab colors of his outfit, reminding you of the bloody reign of the Third Reich. This photo of an overjoyed Hitler is of him after he received a convertible Volkswagen from Ferdinand Porsche. Over 8 decades later, Volkswagen is a company that is still around, but has trouble distancing itself from its Nazi ties. This photo was taken at St. Vith, Belgium, during its recapture. The blues and whites of the sky and snow almost make it look like a vintage holiday card, but the ruins looming overhead show that it's a photograph of a war-torn town. Here is a color photo of a Japanese kamikaze plane. The green army colors contrast with Japan's rising sun emblem, and it looks quite different than what you may expect a Japanese plane to look like. Here's a photo of a man who lost his leg during a bombing of a Viareggio, Italy railway station. In this photo, we do not see any survivors, potentially indicating he might have been one of the few to make it out alive. He looks upon the rubble, and the fact that his back is turned invites us to wonder what he was thinking. Did he have survivor's guilt, or was he just happy to be alive with his body mostly intact? On the beaches of Normandy, many men died. Here's one body that has not been retrieved, a tree fallen beside him. There are soldiers in the background, but none of them pay mind to the man's dead body. Who was this man? What life did he live? Who grieved at his death? These questions haunt us as we look at this photo. And while it's in color, the colors feel very muted, adding to the tragic scene. Here's one of Captain James H. Page. This Los Angeles soldier is in Viareggio, Italy, and stands in an incomplete ship turret bearing the Nazi emblem. It shows that even when soldiers had a serious job to do, they didn't mind posing for a photo, especially with something so imposing. In 1944, Cherbourg, France, was liberated, and the locals returned to their homes. The town was in rubble, yet as long as buildings stood, they felt right at home. Many of these people returned to their homes, even with the windows blown out and the rest of the streets in ruins. The color in this photo makes the French flag pop out, almost like a beacon of light against its dull-colored surroundings. Finally, we have this photo of Hitler in front of many different children. There's a lot to unpack in this photo. First, it's Hitler's 50th birthday, and the Führer looks gaunt. Furthermore, while he's dressed in drab colors, the children are dressed in very colorful outfits. The color adds to this photo, showing the colorful innocence of youth clashing with the aging adult dictator. The Hucker album. This album consists of 116 photos showing the lives of the guards at Auschwitz. When you think of Auschwitz photography, you tend to imagine death. However, these photos show that evil sometimes comes in a smiling face. This photo shows a senior officer with members of the SS Helferinnen, a group of women volunteers. Out of context, it looks like a wholesome photo of people from the past enjoying a little rest and relaxation. But knowing the context, you can't help but get chills looking at this photo. Here's a similar photo. Not knowing the context, it almost looks like an old camp photo. Women, all dressed similarly, are sitting on a fence while a man appears to be flirting with one. Looking at this, you wouldn't realize the horrors that were happening nearby. How about this one? It's a photo of a group of women smiling while a man plays an accordion, an instrument of laughter being played by a mercenary of death. And finally, this photo. While not part of the album, it shows that German soldiers could have a sense of humor. While all context is lost, it's strange seeing them next to an animal mascot. Perhaps it was a Christmas photo, or maybe something more sinister was lingering behind the pictures. These photos serve as a reminder that these Nazi soldiers were humans too, humans who laughed, had pastimes, and loved to shoot the breeze during downtime. But their genocide had become so normalized it seemed like an ordinary job to them. And once the horrors of war cleared their heads, many of them soon realized what they had done, and Germany has never forgotten. There are many other photos from World War II that you don't see often. Some of them are hidden because of their graphic nature, while others are kept out of the public eye because they paint a different story. Remember as well, photography was growing during this period, and it can't all fit in the history books. What was your favorite? Was there a photo that you think we missed? Let us know. And be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications for more fascinating history videos.